So let's get going with part 4 of the Affinity Designer Basic video series. And part 4 deals with layers. Part 1 was File, part 2 the Edit menu, part 3 the text, and now we're on part 4, the Layers menu. Now you'll notice there's quite a few things that are grayed out, and that's because they're dependent on what we're doing on the document when we're working. So let's open up a blank document. Let's say, okay, there we have a blank document now, and I'm going to arbitrarily throw some objects onto it. We can do a circle there, and let's just do, what can we do? A teardrop here. Okay, so we've got these 3 objects, and let me just color them or have a different color for interest sake. Okay, so we've got these 3 objects. So the first area here is to say group. Now you'll notice that if we here, we don't have a area here that shows us group on the dialog box. Once we select more than 2 objects now, the selection has to go over the entire object. So if I go over here from left mouse button and drag, there I've got 2 objects in. Automatically you see on this context menu a group appears there because it gives us now the option to decide to group. So it's the same as I went to layers and I selected that, or I press Ctrl G. Okay, so if I have to draw a group again, whether it's from the left or the right, and I select the objects, we'll be able to group them together. Okay, if I just have one together, I don't get that context menu of group coming up. But let's see if I can take one object and just group it on its own. If I go to layers and I click group, it's pretty much creates a group even though it's one object. So you're able to do that with one object and then drop other objects, drag them into the group. You could do that. But for that group icon context menu to come up, you literally have to select more than one object when you're doing that. Okay, I'm going to go Ctrl Z to undo it. So we're right back to the 3 individual areas. Let me take this and now go select those, and let's show we're going to group it. Okay, so we go back to layers. Now you see there's something interesting that's activated here. The ungroup is activated, and that makes sense because if you want to ungroup this, you can do it. But let's look in the menu side here. Not the menu, but the layers palette. You can see that it's created what we call a group, and in that group you're having the 2 objects. And what's actually quite nice is you see the 2 objects that are in the group even in this little small icon here. Now for those of you who see the layers on the other side, on your right hand side, I have just positioned it here because it makes better sense for me when I work, and we'll get to show you how to do that a bit later. So we have these 2 in a group. If I want to ungroup this, I pretty much can go to layers and say ungroup. Okay, so I'll go ungroup, and you can see that group area, that little folder area, is gone now, and it's then isolated as individual ones. Okay, but if we look here, we see there's a group, ungroup, and an ungroup all. The ungroup all refers to when you have a group within another group. So there's more groups in. So you might have these 2 together, and let's click this one for now. We're grouping them, and then I'm selecting that group plus the other object here, and I'm making another group. So if we look at this, if I click it down now, this area is a group which has got this orange ellipse, and in this group is another group, if you pop down here, which has got these 2 objects. So instead of going and clicking and undoing, because you're going to undo first time, then you sit with another group, you could literally go to the main group and you can go to layer and say ungroup all, and it does it all in one pop. Okay, so if you have tons and tons of groups all put together and you just want to ungroup everything at one go, that's when you will use the ungroup all. Now the next 2 years of very interesting features, and they work similar to some other features that we have in the layers area, and I'm going to have to sort of jump in between them because it's a bit difficult just to show these and then to go show you the other menu items that look exactly the same, but they seem to have different functions. So what I'm going to deal with is, if we look at these features over here, which is the geometry features, Okay, so I'm going to be talking about creating a compound, and I'm going to talk about these geometry features, which is add, subtract, intersect, and XOR. Now I'm going to break a bit of a rule now because I'm not sequentially going through everything, but I think it's worthwhile talking about these two together. Okay, so let me maybe first explain what the geometry does. Okay, what geometry does, it takes the actual components, the actual objects we're using, and it's able to add them together or subtract them from each other or show us an intersect. Let me show you this. So if I grab these two objects, so I've got two objects in here that I've grabbed now. Immediately, if I click off here, if you look on top here, we see there's absolutely nothing in this bar. When I select two objects, you see all these geometry features come in here. And this is literally what we are seeing in this menu. So in this menu where you see geometry here, all of these here are reflecting on what's on here. Okay, so and then we also have these two things that says merge curves and separate curves. There's additional features here that you have here 2, 4, 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have these additional two features here. So these ones are pretty much in this area. Let me show you what they do. So if I select these two areas, I can go in here and I can say add them together, and it's literally join the two together. And this is a destructive add, which means I can't get back to those individual objects unless I go Control Z and undo them, then they're back in the two objects. Same here, if I do that, it's going to minus the one from the other, Control Z. This one is going to do a alteration of the intersection area. This one is going to XOR. It literally is going to take that, subtract that from that common part it's going to remove, go Control Z, and this one will just divide it, will cut it, wherever they cross each other, it's going to cut it into pieces. So when I do that, you literally can come here, move this piece, move this piece. Okay, so I'm going to just go Control Z, get back to the original state. Now, what difference is this create compound? Create compound is actually very powerful. It takes all those features but builds in a non-destructive way of doing it. So say I wanted to create, let me show you, say this effect, that I wanted this object to be like this, and then I decide, oh, you know what, maybe I did 10 other alterations, and I come back and I decide, oh, but you know what, I actually want this area to curve, to go a bit higher up here. But now I've already destroyed the overlap of these two. Let me go Control Z and just get it back there. Instead of doing that, what I could do is select these two objects and not use these geometry areas, not use these areas, but go to create a compound. What create a compound does is it takes these two objects. So it just takes the objects themselves. It doesn't take whatever color they are. It takes the two objects and it places them in relation to each other, and then gives you the ability to choose these geometry features, and they're able to do the cutout, the joining, the adding together and everything, but it keeps the two original shapes together. Let me show you this. If I go to create compound, look what happens in the menu item there. You can see the word changes there to compound, and it also creates this little container. If I pop the container down, you can see now we have these two shapes. So I could come in here and still move this around. Okay, now, but you notice here that both of them have just become gray. If I go onto this tier area and I change color, nothing will happen, because these two areas in a compound don't contain any color information. It's just there almost like a template to use to cut out from each other. So if I want to change the overall color, I'll go to the compound, to the main area, and then I can change the color. It will change to whichever color I'm looking at in this area. But here again, the power here is that if I go to this top layer, you'll see there's a little bluish area here. If I click on that, we now have those different intersection areas. So I can go here and I could say subtract. Remember what we did earlier on? If I designed it like this and I was moving this object and I started working on other areas, if I came back here now, I didn't need to do all the undos and lose all my editing to come and modify here. I could just come back to the compound, just get back inside and maybe decide to move it a bit higher up, and there I have the edit in there. This is a non-destructive way of working with these features, these geometry features of adding or subtracting from each other, and it's all embedded in this area. Okay, so I can get X or R, intersect, add together, but pretty much when I add together, they still remain as independent parts there. Okay, now I could drag one of these objects out of this compound area, or I could even get this object and pull it in here. So if I pull this down here to the bottom, or let's put it in here, I've literally included it in this area. So if I come over here, let's see what happens. You see this area now gets an additional situation here that works for where it gets to the bottom. So this has an effect on here, and that one has an effect on there. So it can become very strategic and kind of complicated as you pull in more areas into the compound area to create shapes, and it's totally non-destructive. You know, you'd always have access to this circle, you'll always have access to the square in the areas, no matter how you modify those square areas, and then you have access to changing the type of intersect modes and that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so you could see the power of compounds. And then under layers, if you want to release this compound, if you're selecting this area, which is this whole compound, you can release all these objects from that compound if you choose to do so. And you'll just go to layer and say release compound. You'll see it will break it into those individual objects again. So compounds, very powerful. It's taking geometry to a non-destructive space. Then arrange, you'll find the arrange, align, transform, and insertions. All of these objects here, all of these titles here, these menu items are on this context board here. Like if you look at arrange, you will see this is the range areas, which literally means you can move things to the front, move them one forward at a time, etc. But also with the arrange, we have these shortcut keys. And although it looks very daunting now to remember all the shortcut keys, there's certain ones that you use more than others. And I find this is really quite useful. Just remembering the control and square brackets, because in a case where you have designs, let's show you, for example, if I have this like this, if I've got the back circle, I literally know now I go control and I can use square right bracket. I bring that forward, or square left bracket, and I move it to the back. If you look at the layers palette here, you can see what's happening. It's moving it forward and back or up the layers. And there's some other shortcut keys also. Maybe I should just mention it now. Hopefully I don't confuse you too much. But it's with a control, you can move the object up and down that you're selecting. If I want to select the rectangle, I now to that control, I add an Alt, and then I keep the same bracket just to move it. And once I have it on the next object, I can let go of the Alt and just keep the control. And then that gives me, so it's the ability to kind of move your cursor in the layers palette, select the other area with Control Alt, and then shift it up. And if you just want to shift it up, you keep Control and the brackets. So yes, I'm maybe getting you quite confused with it, but that's what is displayed in all of these Control Shift brackets and so forth. This is really helpful if you're going layers deep and you just want to select an object and move it up different layers. The other way of doing that is coming into the layers palette here and dragging it up like that. But when you're dealing with tons of layers, 20 layers, and you're selecting something and you just progressively want to move it up, you can go Control and square bracket, and it kind of walks its way up. Or you could just click through, moving up one every time here. But as I mentioned, the arrange is all positioned in these little color brackets. If you hover over it, it will give you the instruction of what it's doing. The alignment, this is also a very crucial tool. With alignment, you'll find it very helpful when you are busy moving and getting objects to align with each other. If I select these objects, I can go into layers, and then I have all these align features that I can do. But I pretty much prefer coming to these little icons on the desk here, or these tools here, because when you click on this toolbar here, you see all the options pop out here that you can use. And starting from the top there, we can align everything to the left now. Besides doing the alignments, you can see here align to, if you pop this down, this is literally saying the last object you selected, if you click align, it's going to align to that object. If you click the first object, then as you go clicking through the objects to select them, it will align to that, or to margins, or to spread. So it gets quite sort of granular when you go into this area. But we're just going to do a general look now. If I've selected all and I click align to left, align to middle, you can see I don't think I've got all of these things attached. Align to left, there we go. Align to middle, align to right. So we can have those as objects. The other thing is that this horizontal space, if I click this now, it's going to check the objects. They're all various sizes, so it's just going to position the objects relative to each other, spaced. So it's just in there, but you'll look at it and you'll say, but there's no spaces in between, because it's taking the center point of each and just using that average to align them there. If you want to get them equally spaced from its edges, then you can disable the auto distribute. It will give it a 0 millimeter or more you could allocate. So look at this. If I say that, it now puts it aligned with the spaces here. And then if I'm going to just hover over here and move my scroll mouse button to increase this number, you can see I can then say between each is going to be 8 millimeters like that. Okay, if I say auto distribute, it will then just calculate the areas of each of these objects and position it to the best that it can do. So often you'd rather go and you'd do the selection and disable that and make your own selection of the distribution point. Same thing with vertical, align to top, align middle, and this is vertically spaced. Same principle works this way. Okay, so these areas are probably where you spend more of your time to do exactly what you see in these menu items. Okay, so here you can see is align left, align right, space horizontally, distribute horizontally, distribute vertically. Okay, now the next one we've covered already, and I'm not going to go through that again. Transform. Here we have the ability to flip left, right, rotate left, rotate right, mirror image, flip horizontal, flip vertical. And if you look at these four, this is where they exist here. Okay, so they are over here. There's your rotate, there's your flips, there's your mirror objects. So it's best to use this, but it's good to know where it exists in the menu. Then insertion, these areas are again what we have in the top corner here. And you can position these things differently to how you want to. Okay, if you don't have a big screen area, you could position them maybe closer to where you want to. But this is literally what it does is it will insert one object, as it indicates here, behind another object, or on top of an object, or inside an object. Now on some of the other videos we showed how to insert something inside an object. So when we have the objects here, if I wanted to select this object here and put it behind this object and in front of that one, what I'll do is I'll go Control X to delete that. Then I will say select this and say insert behind selection, and then Control V, and you can see there it's pasted it behind that selection and in front of the other one. So it's behind this one but in front of this one. Okay, if I had to say now I want to take this orange circle and put it right at the back there, I can go take this, go Control X to cut it out, then select this back one and say insert behind selection, and then Control V to paste, and you'll see it will be pasted right behind both of these because this object is behind this front one. So that is paste behind. This one is in the other way, paste on top, and I'm not going to really go through all that, but it's exactly like that, but it will paste it right on top. And this is the interesting one, is paste inside. So if I maybe delete this one and make this a more entertaining color. So if I had to come here and I click on this one here and I go Control X, select this, and I then click on insert inside selection. If I click there and I say Control V to paste, can you see it pastes it inside that object? You can see there it is. If I make it much bigger, it just shows inside that object. And this is the same that we showed on some of the other videos that we had. You're able to paste inside. You could also paste inside by, if I have this, I can go and I can say paste inside selection, and then I can go to file and go and say place and find another object or an image. Let me take this image, and when I place it here, it will place it inside of that object. So that's the purpose of that inside, which is the menu that represents this insertion part over here. Okay, so these menus are well represented on this bar. The other thing is you might find that some of these things are missing on the bar that I'm showing you, or you might find more on your bar. How you get to that, before I go further down in the layers menu, is you go to view and you go down here to where it says customize toolbar. The bottom one that says customize tools is for what comes on the left here, as I showed in a previous video. The customized toolbar is what comes on top. So let me click this. You will see a dialog like this pop up, where these square dotted lines are just spaces in there. But you see all of these features here. Now here you have one that pops down. It shows all of them. Or you could introduce each one of these on their own and just drag it onto the surface. Let's see if we have one here that is not represented here that I could possibly just drag up to show you. Let me scroll down here. Okay, we have, okay, we don't have, on this one, we don't have this assistant manager. Just so for demonstration purposes, let me show you. What you'll do is you'll left mouse grab here and you'll drag it on here, and you'll position it in some place and you'll let go, and that's where it will be. So when you close, there you have it over there. Okay, so I'm going to just remove that because I don't use it that much. The assistant manager pops up when it wants to help. So I'll go back to customize toolbars, then I'll just grab that and drag it into any space and let go here, and it takes it away there. Okay, so that's how you drag your these toolbars up here if you don't see them in existence over there. Okay, let's go to layers. Now we're going down to this area which says new layer. So new layer, new pixel layer, new adjustment layer. And this got all these pop-out adjustments that you have here. Now these three areas, you can come over here, but if you look inside the layers palette, in the layers area, if you look right at the bottom, here you will have the adjustment layer that I spoke about. Okay, we start from the right here. Here's where you can add a pixel layer, and a pixel layer is meant to have pixel editing features. If you use the pixel persona, it often would work on a pixel layer. So you can add a pixel layer separated from an actual Affinity Designer layer, which is used for vector editing. So you can add a normal layer in, you can add a pixel layer, and let me just click there. That's a pixel layer. That's a normal layer that comes in there. Okay, and then here I can press delete and delete it, or I can take that particular layer and I can just drag it on to the bin area to delete it. So besides just deleting it, if you've selected, you can drag and drop it onto the delete and it will remove. Then this is the layer effects, as I showed in a previous video, where you have this ability here, and we'll show you in the layers how you initiate that also. So these little icons are pretty much demonstrating what is in this layer menu. So we've seen this new layer, there's new pixel layer, and adjustment layer with all of these. So an adjustment layer, for people who are new, is a layer that gets placed with another layer that gives you the ability to do certain modifications, but it's non-destructive. So if you change a particular color in it, you're changing it in the adjustment layer and it's affecting the layer it's attached with, but it doesn't alter the original image. And if you delete the adjustment that you've put in there, the original image still stays the same. And I'll show you one or two examples, but I won't go through all of these. These are features that you have, and you'll come across tons of tutorials teaching you about how to use the channel mixer, exposure, etc. So I'll show you one or two of them as we go through, just to demonstrate how adjustment layers work. Okay, so this, to initiate adjustment layer, you can also come over here. So if I'm on this layer here, if I click on adjustments, you'll see that same list will come out, And let's say I go and I say I'm going to add a not white balance, maybe black and white. You're going to see this object here goes into black and white, and it pops up a dialog box which gives me features to be able to set different color tones and things that I want to work on. Okay, but all of this is linked into this adjustment, which was initiated from either by adding the new adjustment, and I could have come here and said I want to add a, which was the one, I think a black and white that we put in, or I could have come at the bottom, which is what I did. I popped up here and I said, okay, I want to have a black and white adjustment layer. So I want to modify this again. It's as easy as double clicking on there, and then I'll have this dialog window pop up again. If I want to do any sort of checking what this object would look like without this adjustment, you can see here that if this adjustment is on this particular layer, I can click it down, and then this little arrow next to it, I can disable it, and then it will show me the image without that adjustment on. You see it puts a little cross through it, and then I can switch it back on again. I can also drag this adjustment off here, and if I pull it off here, it won't have an effect anymore. It's outside that grouping. I'm going to go Control Z. If I come on here, I could right click and I say release the adjustment. It does exactly the same thing. It will take the adjustment out, but it places it on top because we look from the top down, so we can still see its effect. Switch it off and switch it on. So in this case now I'm going to just delete this. I'll just press delete as I'm on it. So that's how adjustment layers work. It's a modifying layer that goes with the existing object or layer that we are working on. So I'm going to just do one more of these adjustments. Maybe let's show you if we can do, let me choose one that also will be interesting. Okay, I'll use hue, saturation, and luminance. This is actually quite a nice one. So to get this picker out here, I'm going to just click one of these colors and the picker becomes available. I'll click here, just put it over the skin and select there. Where I select, it's telling me what range of colors I've selected, and then I can move these sliders. Now you'll learn a lot about how this all works later, but this is just to show you an adjustment layer has a lot of these different features, like from hue, saturation, luminance, to all these settings that you can have. But look at this here, you could come and you could tone that down, and you could almost make the skin color into like a black and white and still keep the color around there. So you can do all of these things, but these things are done with adjustment layer. So if I switch the adjustment layer off now, you'll see the color comes back. So it's non-destructive in how it works. So I'm going to drag this out here and then I'll just delete it. Okay, so under here, adjustment layer, this is very powerful, but you understand now that it makes an adjustment to the thing it's attached to, but it doesn't destroy it. Then lock, unlock, and unlock all. If I'm working, for example, here, and I'm going to just pull this out and just delete this. If I make a copy of this one, I press Control J, and I say I've got the stop image and I want to move it here, but I don't want to move the bottom one accidentally, for example. I could select the bottom one and I could press the lock button. So I could do it in the layers menu and click lock there, or use the shortcut key. In the same way, I can come here and press lock, so that if I grab on here, it won't move. It will only allow the top one to move. So that's what the lock is for. And then I can unlock if I've locked, say, both of these. If I select both of these and I click lock, then I can come to layers and I can say unlock all. It will unlock the ones I've selected. These ones, convert to curves, are very powerful. Why would we use them? Let me just clear this palette up. Convert to curves is used when you're using vector objects. Now, the reason for converting to curves, it has many valuable reasons for converting, but often these objects that you bring in, which I refer to as kind of parametric objects, they shaped already. They're either a circle, a rectangle, a square, but they come in like this and they've got formats on them. They've got a color in and they've got an outline. In this case, the outline stroke is 0, so we're not seeing anything. And if I maybe make the outline stroke black and just make it a little bit thicker. You'll see it over there. So this is showing us that there is a shape, and this is a shape over here, but it's brought in as these almost in 3D world we call it as primitive objects. It's the kind of a triangle. It's shaped already, and then you just tweak it. So it's not like just taking a line and drawing it. So in this case, if we want to modify it outside of these generic shapes that we have, if we go to the node tool, which is the thing that can give us a bit more granular editing features, if I click on the node tool, when I click on here and I grab these handles, it doesn't do anything different to me going to the move tool and trying to do these handles or rotating. Same here, it just gives me these global handles. So for me to be able to edit the outline of this object and to really be able to tweak it, I have to convert this object from these parametric or these primitive objects into a object that is made up of curves and a fill color. So you'll go to this menu which says convert to curves. Sometimes if your menu is long, this convert to curves might be tucked away on the side. You'll have to click a little button for it to appear here. But in this case, we're going to go and we're going to go down to the menu that says convert to curves. Okay, if you say that, nothing unusual will change over here. It looks still exactly the same. But you'll notice in this side, I'm going to go Control Z again. It says ellipse here and triangle, because that's an ellipse, that's a triangle. So when we come to the layers and we go to convert to curves, in this case, I'm going to press Control Return. So I'm going to select that, keep Control down and press Return. But watch what happens there. It's going to change from ellipse to curves. Okay. And in the same way, if I do that, press Control Enter, it renames to curves. And there's a big difference between having an ellipse and a triangle and the curves. Now, let's look if we go to the node tool and I click on the node tool and I click on that object. Very interesting, these things changed here. Now I can actually grab on that and start to make more effective granular edits on it. I've now got handles and everything that I can tweak it. So that's the power of converting to curves. If I come to this triangle now, I can manipulate this area. I even can, if I hover over the lines that we have, you can see a little sort of line. If I left mouse grab and just hold and drag, I can tweak it here. I can do that and tweak it out. Or if I click on here and let go, it will drop another node that I can work with here. So those node features now become exciting features to be able to edit your objects really to a fine degree. So you're no longer sitting with those conformed objects, which are these structured objects that we used initially. So that's the purpose of the convert to curves. Another place that convert to curves come in very handy is if you are doing text. Let's say we're saying do. So you're working with this. This is a font, so it's got certain parameters that are locked into it and certain formats that are built into it. But if you want to now tweak this and make this an original modification for you, you can't work on this and distort this D. You can maybe size it and skew it a bit using maybe like a thing like this where you can skew it. That's about as much as you can do. But if you really want to tweak the letter, let's put maybe an R in there. If you want to tweak this R maybe to have a different area, you're going to have to convert this also to curves. So what we will do is select here and there again convert to curves, or we can go to layers and we say convert to curves. It now converts it to curves. I'm going to go Control Z now because I didn't highlight you looking to the left here. If you look to the left, that's just the word. If we go convert to curves, look what happens on the left. It turns into a group. If I pop this down, we see now each of these letters have now been converted to an outline and a fill color. Now these become independent, but they're still in a group. So if I had to come after doing that convert to curves and I move, they'll still stick together because they're in a group. Okay, so at this stage, I can literally grab these three, keep shift down and grab them and drag them out of the group. Or there's an easier way of doing it. I can come here, and remember what we did the last time, we ungrouped it. So I can just go to the ungroup here, or I could go to the layers menu, but I'm going to go here because we have seen this before. If I say ungroup, you're going to see this group disappears and just the individual ones stay there. Go ungroup, and there we go. We have the individual layers. But this is now, these things, we've converted them to curves. And what is the power of that? We're now able to add node editing onto it. So if I click onto nodes, there we have nodes, and I can now even customize this node to look like the real weirdest R. But now we have the full flexibility of editing. So converting a parametric object or a firm structured object that we have here, or text, to convert to curves gives us the flexibility of using nodes to edit it like I'm showing you here. Okay, so that's been quite a bit of a mouthful with it, but I think you now understand why convert to curves is so powerful. Let's go to the next one, which is convert to text frame. This is a very interesting one, and this you can use if, for example, I'll show you one sample. If you have an object that you're busy working with and you want to write text, but you want to write text so that the text aligns to this object. Now that you probably will do in programs like Publisher, but let me show you how you do it over here. You'd come, for example, I'm going to just draw another object, and remember we're going to use the skill set that we have now. We're using the skill set of converting to curves. If I convert to curves, we've now taken this object and converted it to curves. I'll just grab these two nodes here, and let me just move them back so I can see what's going. But I'm going to just show you a little tweak here. We'll take them maybe across there. Now if I hover over this, because we have it as these nodes able to work, I'm just show you that. And if I pull it over here, okay, so I've got this object here, and let me show you where this comes into being, using layers. If I now have this object selected and I go to convert to text frame, whatever the object is that I've selected, now I'm going to convert that to a text frame, which means once I click this button, I can load text into this structure and it will follow this format. So if I click here, you'll see there now it doesn't have all that formatting because now it becomes a text frame. And as I showed you in our previous lesson, if I right click on here, I can say let's put some, for example purposes, some filler text. When I drop it in here, look at that. Okay, and then still I can go to my node tool and I can still modify it to wherever I want to take it and move these things, because now I've created a text frame to work into. So that's quite a powerful feature with this convert to text frame. And then the next one is convert to text path. Okay, if we follow the actual wording now, we'll understand that if I have an object like this, it's got a path that's created around it. If I do a circle, there's a path on that circle. So if I use this feature and I say let us convert this object to a text path, that means that when it's done here, similar to that shape that it created, it's going to use the path that's on this object to allow us to put text onto the path. Okay, so that the previous one was convert to a text frame. That meant text went into the frame that we created. This one is going to be text going onto the path, which is the outline of the object that we're going to click on. So if we click on here, look what happens. We've got this strange long line. It's because our font size is so big. I'm going to just drop it down to say 11, or maybe make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. So this is the font line text. So you can see now if I carry on writing, it's going to go around this shape. So you could take any shape. We could even take a pen tool and do some sort of strange shapes that we're doing here. And we could take that object and we could say layers, let us convert that to a text path, and then it will allow us to type on there. Okay, so that's a very powerful tool, and it's used often when you're creating logos with a circle and text inside. Just interesting to note, you see there's these little green handles and red handles. They fulfill quite crucial functions on how the text lines here, how they function on here, and then when you're on a text line like this, then everything on this context menu starts to change to reference this text. For example, if I go here, I've showed it in a previous video, it can reverse the text path, push it back again, and you have other features over here. Okay, so just understand that there's lots of features that go with each of these menu items. So let's go to the expand stroke. Now, expand stroke is also a very powerful feature. And this particular video is going to go a bit longer than most of the other ones before, because it's such a rich amount of features that you find in the layers area. But expand stroke, what that means is if you have an object like this, and let's say you have the stroke on the outside that's thickly. What expand stroke means, it's going to take the stroke and remove it from this object. It's going to detach it. At the moment, the stroke and the fill-in color is one object. If you look here, it's just one object that moves. It's not separated. However, if you go to your layers and you go to expand stroke, now I use this so much that I've given it my own shortcut key, which is E, because I use it when I create offset paths. I use it when I do cutouts and everything. And if you watch some of my other videos, you'll see how I use this particular feature quite a bit. But in this case here, if you ever have the need to expand the stroke, this is how you do it. You'll click expand. And what expand stroke does, it not only detaches this color area from the stroke itself, but if you look at the stroke is made up of a line, and the line has a color towards the inside and outside. And this, where the color goes from this line, can be determined in the stroke palette, which we'll get to much later in the video series. But the stroke palette, if you look over here, you're able to let the align the stroke to inside. So just watch where this area is. If I go align to inside, can you see that it starts right on the outside and the stroke is towards the inside? If I go towards the outside, it's right here and the stroke to the outside. If I do the first one, it will move it so that it's equal outside and inside. You can see that, okay? But when I go and click the layers expand stroke, it's going to detach these two, but also it's going to convert this stroke into a color inside and a stroke here and a stroke on the outside. So it's going to be one stroke, two strokes, and it's going to fill it with a color. That's what it's going to do with the stroke. So if I click here, just look what happens. You'll literally see also in the layers palette, you'll see it will form a new object there. Let's click here. It's now, if I hide this one, you'll see what happens. Can you see that outline? It's literally kept that whole area and converted it into an independent structure now. Okay, and this is the color that we had on the inside. Now let me just show you what I meant is when it expanded the stroke, it's literally made it into another stroke on the inside and outside, but it's at the moment you don't see any stroke because it's on 0. I'm going to just do something interesting and change the color, say to red, and you can see something happening. Let me just make it a little bit thicker. Can you see there? So it's taken that stroke, that single stroke, and because you expanded it, it's able to separate from the fill-in color and literally created another stroke inside, another stroke outside with a full color. So this is quite a powerful tool that you can use to manipulate in lots of different areas. Okay, so that is your expand stroke. Now rasterize and rasterize to mask. If you're using masks inside Affinity, often you'd need to, if you're creating a mask, you often need to rasterize a particular image to utilize it. In some cases, you don't need to rasterize it. You can just use it straight as a mask. But in this case, we'll show you how that's used. Now, to explain to people, let me just bring this back, and I'm going to just delete this outer expanded area. Now remember, when you get the inside area separating from the outside, the inside has its own border. A new border gets filled with it, even though that previous border now has been cut off it. It has its own new border. So if I increase thickness, it will be back there. So that's how brilliant the vector editing programs work. Okay, so if you look close here, you can see this is a perfect thing because it's vector. But if you convert this to a raster image, which is pixel based. It's like photos work. Photos are made up of thousands of small dots, and when you look at them together, they look like a full picture. However, if you zoom in far, it becomes very distorted. So we want to be able to see now what this would look like if I finish with this edit and I export it to a raster image, which is a pixel-based image. I don't have to convert it, so I don't have to come here to layers and say rasterize and then see what it does and then undo it again. I have a nice feature here, and I'm jumping the gun now, but under view, we have a view here that says split view. And what this split view will do, it will show us one side what the vector looks like, and the other side what the pixel-based or a rasterized image will look like. So let me click this, and you see it brings in here on the left it's vector, on the right is pixels. So once I export it, it will look like this on the right here. So this is how you can actually see how things would look once they're going to be exported. When you zoom out, there's not any difference because, you know, it's a high resolution picture, but still there is a distinction when you're working with pixels. That is pixels, that is vector art there. Okay, so let me just go back here and under view, let's get back to a single view. So this button here would take it to be a rasterized image. So I'm going to just rather make a copy of this and then rasterize one of them, and we can look at them like this. So this one I'm going to rasterize. As I said, with many of them, if you right click on it, you probably will have all the menus that you have up here would be available here also. So there's menus that come in this bar, menus that drop down, and also right click context menus. They change according to what objects you're selecting. So here we have rasterize. I'm going to rasterize it. There immediately you can see this is, if I bring it close and we zoom in, you can see this is now rasterized. This is all changed into pixels. Okay, if this was a photograph, these pixels would have also been seen a bit distorted on the image itself. So that's what a rasterize is. When we talk about the next one, which is rasterize to mask, it literally takes what is here and it will change it into a mask, which literally is black and white or whichever color, gradient of color in, and it adds it as a mask to an area below. Let me show you what I mean with this. I'm going to just place an image in here, our favorite image that we're using. So if I have this image and I move this up to the top, so I'm going to say now, I'm going to take this image and I'll say, let me rasterize this to mask. Okay, so I'm turning this into a mask. It's going to turn it into a pixel-based image, but then it's going to either give me a tone. A mask is something that works from black to white and different shades in between. So this is not white, it's not black, so it's going to probably, when I turn it to a mask, it's going to be a level of gray, but then it's going to mask out an area. And let me show you what happens. So I can go to layer and say rasterize to mask, or I could come to the layer, right click on it, and I can say rasterize to mask, or go to the object that I select, click there and say rasterize to mask. Let me click here. So that's what's happening. It's creating a mask through which I'm looking. And the reason why it's kind of faded out like this is because that color that we have in terms of from black to white, because it's just a mask, just works in black to white, gives us this kind of gray color. Now I'm going to go Control Z, and if I make this object, I'm going to make it totally white. Oops, no, that's the outline. I'm going to make this totally white. White reveals and black conceals. So if I'm making this totally white and I'm saying right click and say let's rasterize to mask, the white, what's under the white will be revealed, and the rest, because there's no color on it, will go black and it will conceal. So we'll just see the object showing through here. So let's say rasterize to mask, and there we have it. And this I can move around because this is just a mask over here, or size it accordingly. Okay, but yes, the big difference is when I zoom in here, you can see, because it's been rasterized, you can see that the edge is the pixels. Okay, because we've changed that from a vector to a rasterized image or a pixel-based image, which is different to the one I showed you earlier where we put an object inside another one. That one shows us a perfectly clear circle. And maybe I should just do that while this is fresh in your mind. If I have to do this, okay, I'm going to select this object, go Control X, do this and say, now this is a vector object. It's not being rasterized. If I say into selection, Control V, now if we look at the edge, you can see it's got a perfect area because it's using vector now and not the rasterized mask. Okay, we're getting closer to the end as we go to these last objects. Promote to group, or promote group to layer. That just means that if I have, let me take a few objects here. If I have a few objects that I have in here, they are selected and we put them in a group, I can have that being converted to a layer, to the menu, and say promote this group to a layer. So when I click here, it changes that from a group to a layer. And the behavior of a group and layer is kind of different in how they operate. Okay, so that's just a feature. Then let's see what we have here. Convert an object to an artboard. So in this case here now, if I'm on the layer, so if I select a particular object and I go to layer, I can see convert this object to artboard. It will now put this on a artboard on its own. Okay, so there's a lot of other purposes for it. I'm just showing you this so that you know that it's able to do that. You're going to learn that in later videos. Then we go further down and we can say convert this artboard to an object. So if I, for example, let me just create an artboard. Let me create another artboard. So on this artboard, if I do this, and let me see if I place that there and maybe do this. If I come now and I select this artboard, and I want to use this entire artboard on this particular object, maybe I do the background in that color, I can select that artboard, come to layers and say convert this artboard to object. It will change it there and I can move this whole thing across here. So that's what I can do, and you might think what use is that now, but once you start using the program you'll find, wow, I've created this whole artboard with background effects, but I want to use that maybe as that whole design. I want to use it inside a sample. An example would be if you got on a separate artboard a whole design of a mobile device, the facing of it, and then you're doing a sample mobile device and you want to drop that in here, then you just convert that into an object and bring it across here. That's like one of the many uses that you have. And then layer effects. So layer effects is the same as we're able to get here at the bottom. So it just gives us it in a menu area that we're able to add. Look at some of the videos I've done before talking about the 3D, the boss and embedel and that, and you'll get the pulse of how this all works. But this is just to initiate this menu, which is also able to be initiated from this bottom area by layer effects over here. And while we're at this point here, let me just explain that this can create a mask layer wherever you're working. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video where we probably will cover the select and the view together. And probably we might even do all three, the last ones together, because Windows is small and select is also a small grouping. The view is quite a big one that we'll be dealing with.